I think a lot of times families' hopes are to really stay out of the hospital and have good quality of life for however much time they have left.
Welcome to Better Together podcast, produced and directed by our Hospice of South Central Indiana, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to making every moment count. We share true stories about hospice, palliative, and personal care services that we provide in 22 counties all over South Central Indiana. I am your host and president, Steph Kane. In the studio today, we have two wonderful team members that help increase access to care. Welcome to Susie Wagner and Christy Henderson. Hey.
Thank you.
So glad to have you both here. Christy and Susie really oversee and steward the front door to our hospice organization, meaning really they are about increasing access to care and helping navigate that journey to hospice and through hospice, right, in the very beginning stages. So Christy is a referral specialist, and she helps guide providers and families along the journey through those early stages of hospice care from our hospital setting and to their home or wherever they call home. And then we also have Susie Wagner, who is a registered nurse. She's one of our admission nurses. Susie's broad clinical background enables her to meet families right where they are with compassion during that first hospice visit. I'm curious, what inspired both of you to pursue a career in hospice work? And maybe we can start with you, Susie.
It's what I'm called to do. It's just what I'm called to do.
Yeah. Have we taken care of any family members on a personal level or, neighbors or friends in our hospice?
My grandmother was on service with us. She passed away in 2008. And then while I was employed with our hospice, my mother was on service and passed away in 2018.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for the gift. I know you and your family made Christmas dinner on Christmas Day for all of our employees working at the hospice center, and your son played some music, so thank you for doing that. That was just a great tradition and memory, so thank you for that. All right, and Chrissy, how about you? What really inspired you? There's a lot of places we can work, and what inspired you toward, to move toward hospice care?
After working in a corporate job for so many years, I decided I wanted to do something that made people feel good, that made me feel good, and I wanted to just give back.
Yeah, there's deep purpose. We can go home feeling that wonderful sense of purpose for sure. Christy, let's start with you. I'm wondering what you typically experience when you meet families at the front door of our hospice. So maybe when they're in the hospital, what are families usually feeling in that first conversation?
My experience, I think a lot of patients and families are fearful.
Yeah.
Sometimes sad, sometimes overwhelmed, and a lot of times undereducated on what hospice is and what hospice can provide.
Yeah. So what's typically happening in a family's life when, you receive that first call to go over and meet with them?
Sometimes a family is overwhelmed. They can't take care of their loved one like they want to, and then the physician or the doctor will give us a call, and then, we're their first point of contact.
Could you share maybe some examples or a couple of stories that you hear around hopes and worries when you're talking to folks first entering hospice?
I think a lot of times families' hopes are to really stay out of the hospital and have good quality of life for however much time they have left. Some of the worries are when they can get home. A lot of people want to be back in, their own space. That's where they feel the best, and how our team can help support them in this phase of their journey.
I'm going to shift over, Susie. When you walk into a home now, fast forward, let's say now we're ready to have an admission to hospice where folks are going to elect their hospice benefit. What are the most common questions that families ask you right away?
I think the number one question, what's a time frame? How much longer do I have on this earth? And that's probably one of the most challenging questions that we get due to not knowing the patient. We're just getting involved because I can't predict. It's never up to me.
So how do you navigate that question with families?
It's one of those things. We're looking at a disease process. We're seeing a timeline because there are some that come on at the end of life who may have days, hours, and there's been times where, they've passed in the middle of the admission. We can kind of give a timeline based on the signs that we are seeing. We also have a book when the time comes that kind of gives that guideline too. And I like to point that out in the book. and walk them along with that and tell them what I'm seeing.
Medicare has some guidelines when you elect hospice where two physicians agree that, if your disease process followed its normal course, 6 months or less would be the timeline that you could say, yes, you qualify for hospice. We will have people not hours or days, but weeks to months, and even sometimes over more than a year. Do you find that to be the case?
Yes. Sometimes, especially when we're getting newly diagnosed cancer patients, they may have stage 4 cancer. Symptoms, have been very vague. They go to the center and they're calling us in from the center. We go, we bring them over. Life expectancy sometimes could be a matter of days, even hours. And, they're newly diagnosed, not had time to process anything. Families coming over in shock, trying to ease the family's mind of what's going on and trying to walk with this patient to get them comfortable. And that can be quite challenging. But on the other side of the pendulum, we get patients who come on service who have dementia. When they are diagnosed with dementia, we're getting called in, that can be very slow progressing. We can bring them on service, and we've had patients on 3 and 4 years. They're showing a slow decline, but it is a noticeable decline.
What are some of the benefits when folks are moving from their hospital benefit and electing hospice that they can experience?
The biggest one that comes to mind is comfort. And that looks different for everybody. I have some families that, just want to go home, be in their own home, or go watch their kids at a game, or just sit on the couch with their dog, I mean, that's comfort to them.
Susie, what's one of your favorite things about hospice care versus other kinds of acute care?
I think with hospice care, it's something that we're called to do. I believe that everybody deserves the right to die with dignity. I don't know how else to answer that other than this is what I'm called to do. It's what I'm passionate about.
Can you walk me through what a typical admission visit might look like for someone who hasn't gone through that? Not necessarily the paperwork, but the experience for the family.
Absolutely. When we have an admission, I'm that first physical contact at times. It just depends on where they're coming from, whether it's the hospital or they've reached out to Christy or Angie by phone. When I arrive at the patient's home, before I get out of my vehicle, I'm assessing the situation. Walk into the home, I introduce myself. I don't start talking about hospice right away because anxiety is very high. So I'm always trying to find a connection with that family. This is a small community, so whether it be a mutual acquaintance, looking at their house, looking at their pictures, trying to find a connection to ease their mind a little bit because
it builds trust.
Absolutely. And that is so important. Then once we sit down, start asking how you're doing, what concerns do you have? And a lot of times, how much longer do I have? Are you going to take away the medications? Are we giving morphine? And that's when the education comes in. We're discussing the disease progression, because every disease runs a different course.
I think that is one of the myths. And Christy, do you hear that also? Are you taking away my meds?
Yes, we hear that a lot.
Yeah, so we have, some mythbusters about hospice, right? So
absolutely.
I think often we'll get that question, are you going to take away all my meds? And maybe, I'm not sure where that comes from, but someone may have had that experience, and that sort of, that fear and anxiety will travel through loved ones or families or communities. So that isn't the case.
Right. No.
Yeah.
With the medications, and that's one of the things we do on admissions, that is a huge part of our job, is reviewing medications. And when we have families coming on service, a lot of times they are going to be on 15 to 20 different medications. Half of them may be cardiac related, diabetic related, and then we start looking at supplements.
So you try to help simplify that.
Absolutely. Those cardiac medications, those diabetic medications, those are necessary. But giving somebody who is not hardly eating calcium, vitamin C, zinc, magnesium, that is filling them up. And families are like, well, they're not hardly eating. You're dealing with a decreased appetite. You're filling them up on medications. But on the other hand, part of our assessment, we're assessing vital signs. We're assessing for falls, cardiac medications, blood pressure medications. If they are on blood pressure medications and they're running a very low blood pressure, we will stop those medications because
they could fall.
Yes, due to that increased risk of falls. And we do not want anybody to get hurt. We want to focus on that comfort, their safety and well-being. And so sometimes we do stop those blood pressure medications due to the fact there is that low blood pressure and we don't need to have that added risk.
While we're on the topic of medications, there's another myth. I'll just say from a personal experience, I've had families say, okay, we're ready. And maybe I'll be down rounding in the inpatient unit we have here. And I'll say, what are you ready for? And I don't know if you've experienced this, but can we have a conversation about that? Folks think that hospice is going to give a magic shot. And is that right? And then
that is true. Yep. We've received phone calls in the referral office and families will ask just that. They'll say, can I come in? I'm ready for the shot.
Yeah. So that's illegal. We don't do that. No hospices do that.
No.
But I do think, again, that's another myth that we need to talk about. And Susie, do you get that experience? You have experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm ready. Or morphine. A lot of families fear giving morphine. They said, that's what killed my mother. I don't want to be the one to give that lethal dose. And we start out low, we start out slow. There may be some mild side effects, but there's a lot of benefits to the use of morphine. And it's just a matter of educating and people understanding it's not a medication that's going to kill you. It's just to provide that comfort, to ease the breathing.
Yeah, ease the breathing and symptoms.
The pain. Yes,
stuff.
Absolutely.
Can you share a story about, maybe each of you think about, is there a story you can share about a family or patient on admission that went really well, and then maybe something that, was a really difficult admission for the patient or for you? Just so that I know we like to share real stories that people can learn from.
I have a recent one. Family was denied by another hospice. And so
admission.
Correct. Okay. They reached out to us and we advocate for our patients. That's what we're here for. So that's exactly what we did. And we were able to get him on service. We only had him for less than a month, but we took care of him and his family. And then we got a very nice thank you.
Oh, yeah. Doesn't that feel so good?
It feels wonderful.
That is one of the things I know we're really passionate about, covering 22 counties. And a lot of those in southern Indiana are underserved or uninsured. And so being a not-for-profit, it's a real gift that we have the generosity of our community to help support some of those gaps of unpaid care, so we can provide charity care.
I think I had a recent case within the last month or two where I had been in an admission. We had gotten the patient home. And sometimes there are signs that we can see that we're in those final minutes. And was working with the family, and I told her that she needed to sit by her father. We can do paperwork really quick, but she needed to stay by him. He told her in the hospital he wanted to go home. We were able to get him home, and he passed away probably within an hour of getting him home. As disappointing as what it was that he wasn't able to fully receive all our services, to sit there with her and the family, provide that education, provide that end-of-life care, it was rewarding in its own way. And family was very appreciative of what we've done in providing that education. What is going on? Why is he breathing hard? Why is this happening? And just kind of given a play-by-play of everything happening.
Yeah. What would you say you wish people understood about timing with hospice?
I would say how important it is. Education is huge, kind of goes along with those misconceptions. So the sooner we can get you or your loved one on services, the sooner that we can provide excellent care and make every moment count.
How about you, Susie?
I agree with Christy. The sooner that we can bring them on so that they can receive all the benefits that they've worked hard for over the years.
If somebody is listening and they just heard the word hospice for the first time this week, what would you like them to do as a next step?
I would say reach out and ask questions. I think people fear the word hospice, Hospice has changed so much.
Susie?
They need to be having conversations with the families as well, because walking in, a lot of times they're not having end-of-life conversations. And I feel like decisions are being placed on children who want what's best for their parents, but they do not want to have that
Burden.
Yes.
Yes.
And then when they pass, they have that guilt of, what if I did this? What if I did that? So I think the conversation needs to start within the family unit first, and then reach out to us.
This is Better Together, a podcast dedicated to making every moment count. Thank you for listening. Please like us and share on your social media channels. If you have a question or would like to learn more about a specific topic, you can find us at ourhospice.org or call 812-314-8083. Until next time, remember, life is short. We are better together, making every moment count.